The government facing allegations of cronyism after Boris Johnson exchanged text messages about tax concessions with the businessman James Dyson.
Let's hear Sir Keir Starmer first put those accusations to the Prime Minister in the House of Commons.
Every day there are new allegations about this Conservative government. Dodgy PPE deals, tax breaks for their mates. The Health Secretary owns shares in a company delivering NHS services. Sleaze, sleaze, sleaze.
We're joined now by Secretary of State for Business, Kwasi Kwarteng. Very good morning to you.
Hi. Good morning.
You do not want to be a government that is associated with accusations of sleaze, 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 do you?
Absolutely, I think, but I don't think those accusations are true. And we can talk about James Dyson. We can talk about the fact that the Prime Minister did all he could to try and make sure that we had ventilator manufacturing here, and he would do it again.
So, firstly, we have the issue of during the coronavirus, the early months, no one is going to blame the government for trying to get PPE fixed. We were all on the case and we wanted those ventilators to be in place. What people have an issue with is, firstly, direct access to the Prime Minister through mobile phone contacts, which other businesses, for instance, may not have had. And indeed, people say, well, NHS workers don't have access to the Prime Minister to lobby him on their behalf if they, for instance, want to ask for a pay rise for the sort of work that they did during the pandemic. The second thing is questions over those conversations that Sir James Dyson, the Prime Minister, had about how much tax workers would have to pay, because nobody wants a situation in which once you've got the private phone number of the Prime Minister, you are then asking for different tax arrangements.
I think you're right. I think there is a suspicion, and people are right to ask questions about undue influence. I completely understand that. In this particular instance, the Prime Minister had to act very quickly. There was a pandemic crisis. Thousands of people were dying across Europe. There had been a particular issue in Italy where they didn't have ventilators on hand. And the Prime Minister acted very decisively and quickly with the relevant ventilator manufacturer to make sure that we had this capability here in the UK. And that was a very direct process. It was a very extraordinary set of circumstances. And the Prime Minister acted quickly. And as he said in the House of Commons yesterday, he moved heaven and earth to make sure that we had the ventilators in the UK. And we did. It was a successful outcome. We've also had a successful outcome with the vaccine rollout. We're very keen to make sure that we get through to June the 21st and can reopen the economy. So it was quite right for the Prime Minister to act very quickly, as he did.
Was it quite right for him?
To communicate.
Yes, to act quickly on the ventilators. Yeah, to act quickly on the ventilators is one thing. But is it quite right to have a conversation about tax arrangements as part of that discussion, where Sir James talks about the tax arrangements for his workers in the UK, and Boris Johnson replying, I will fix it. The Chancellor says it's fixed, we need you here. Sir James Dyson seeks further reassurance about those tax arrangements. And the Prime Minister says, I am First Lord of the Treasury and you can take it that we are backing you to do what we need. And a little bit later on, those tax arrangements were changed.
So the big point there was that we needed to back somebody to make the ventilators. You yourself were good enough to acknowledge that it was successful, that we managed to ensure that the ventilators were here in a quick way. And you
was the change in tax arrangements part of that deal? That's what people want to know.
I'm not privy to the deal. All I know is that the Prime Minister had direct contact with James Dyson and we managed to make the ventilators in time. And as a consequence of that, thousands of people who might have died were saved. And I saw, as a minister, what was going on in Italy. There were ghastly pictures of people dying, gasping for breath because there weren't ventilators. And I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister acted in the way he did to make sure that we had enough ventilators to keep more people safe.
OK. Kwasi Kwarteng, I'd like to shift the discussion to talk about the legacy of George Floyd. And this week we've seen a conviction of Chauvin. He will now serve maybe 40 years, maybe more in prison. And a lot of people in America calling it justice. But also a lot of people in America are saying the deep-rooted problem and the cause of the cause is systemic racism. And that comes from the very top. That is the President of the United States has turned to the Floyd family and says, we've got a problem here of systemic racism. And people are commending him for his leadership. We had a race report here which claimed that we don't have institutional racism here. The United Nations have had to intervene and say, well, I'm afraid you do. And many contributors to that report, now over 20 contributors to that report, have distanced themselves. People who were called commissioners of that report have said, we never saw the final results. We had no idea this was going to be the summation of that report. Is it time for the government to be honest and say we do have a problem so we can all have an honest discussion about institutional racism across the UK?
So the report actually said that racism was a problem, that we were dealing with it. It also made recommendations, I think 25 policy recommendations, to improve race relations and to improve equality in the UK. And none of those recommendations, as far as I can see, have been objected to by anyone. Now, the debate has always been about whether Britain is in inverted commas, a racist country. And the report said that it wasn't. There are racists in Britain. Absolutely, there are racists in every country. But to say that the country was racist was something that the report
I think that's very
questioned. I think it was perfectly. I think it was perfectly right to do that.
Kwasi, I think you're making it quite dramatic there. No one's saying that it's a racist country. It's all about institutional racism. But institutional racism means that why do we have more black people being arrested? Why do ethnic minorities represent more than any other people in prison? Why do black and mixed race people are more likely to live in non-decent homes? Why are exclusion rates at school higher amongst ethnic minorities? Why is health a worse situation for people of black and Asian origin? These aren't saying that the whole country is racist. We're just saying that there is unfairness, injustice and inequality. Why can't we just say that?
So what you're the report did say that. The report mentioned all of those.
Well, it didn't actually. I'll tell you what the report did. The report quoted Michael Marmot, who's one of the most important voices when it comes to health inequalities. But they quoted his report from 2009, but they didn't quote his report later, which was only last year, where he clearly said there is a problem with systemic racism. And by that he means that if you live in poor areas, if you're deprived, if you've got low income, you will then suffer low health. That report chose not to include that bit. It was manipulative, and you must accept that.
I don't think it was manipulative. I think the point that you made just now about relative deprivation and poverty is a key point. So it's absolutely the case that we want to try and level up. That's the whole point of the levelling up agenda, is that we want to minimise or reduce those inequalities that people face from poverty. There is a problem with that. No one is saying that we live in a perfect country with no problems. What the report was saying, and it should be noted that there's been a huge improvement in terms of race relations in the UK. There are opportunities for everybody in the UK in a way that didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago. And you and I remember those days when you mentioned the Hanworth riots or the Tottenham riots in 1985 as well. I remember those. I was a 10-year-old boy at that time. And I recognise that we've made a huge improvement in the way that society is organised and the way we live our lives. Does it mean it's a perfect country? No, it isn't. There's still a lot of progress that we need to make. But I think the report itself has been slightly distorted and misrepresented. And I think it had some very good recommendations, which, as I said, nobody has objected to.
OK, a lot of people have objected to the report, I think, and when the
recommendations, I specifically said the recommendations. Okay. I didn't mean the report.
Just talking about
the recommendations.
Talking about progress, you are also the Energy Secretary. Boris Johnson is going to tell world leaders today that 2021 is the year countries must get serious about climate change. Well, climate change activists appear to be getting serious this morning. I don't know if you've seen these pictures, Mr. Kwarteng. From HSBC. Apparently activists have shattered almost 20 windows at the headquarters in London's Canary Wharf. It's part of a protest against the financing of what the group says is devastating climate change, which threatens the planet. They've used hammers to break the windows. They've pasted stickers on the windows. And then they sat down and waited for police to arrive. What's your reaction to that this morning?
Well, I think that any vandalism, any destruction of property is not only criminal, but should be denounced. And I'm not pleased that they're doing that. I understand the passion. I understand the fact that people want urgent action, and that's why we have an Earth Summit today. That's why the Prime Minister is encouraging and urging other countries to have more ambitious carbon reduction targets. We've announced a 78% reduction target for 2035, and that's 78% reduction from 1990. As you know, 1990 is the base year for calculating these carbon emission reductions. But I'm not going to condone destruction of property or vandalism in any way. I think the police, quite rightly, have stepped into that situation.
Yeah. All right, Kwasi Kwarteng, then we must leave it. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.